Welcome to Journey of the Dove. For those of you interested in time and time travel, please check out my recent discussion with Amy Dempster of Following Hawks. Our discussion is a good summary of how Nikola created his time technology and is now living in an alternate timeline. You can find the link to Amy's video under my playlist titled Friends. For today's video, I have something I think you'll really enjoy. Nikola Tesla's Astrology, as read by the shaman who did a shamanic session for me back in 2019. As part of that session, she read my natal chart. I was so impressed by her information that I later requested her to read Nikola's chart. Her astrological knowledge, combined with her shamanic wisdom, gives fresh insights into Nikola's personality and his spiritual abilities. Please note the unique time of birth we did for his chart. Nikola Tesla is somewhat famously known for having been born at midnight during a lightning storm. I asked him if midnight was the exact birth time we should use. He clarified that he had been born just a couple minutes after midnight. For this reading, the time of 12:02 a.m., July 10th, 1856 was used.
Today's date is September the 24th, 2020, and it's a very unusual year and historic year, and we are about to work with Amber on a very unusual chart, astrology chart. So we'll see. We'll see what comes up. I'm just in service, so I'll be surprised too. So we have this chart of an important opposition. If it's true that it's in the right houses, so you both have the Taurus Rising. So you're 13 degrees and he's 3 degrees Taurus Rising. So I'm looking at your chart, and his moon Libra conjunct Mars, intercepted. We don't know for sure if it's intercepted because of the time possibilities, but if it's intercepted, he was a man that could, I want to say, in the sixth house too. That's in his sixth house, and your sixth house also has a lot going on, which means that you like to be busy with the ordinary things of life. There's something about the ordinary that you're bringing all that Scorpio and Libra to. He's bringing Libra to it. So you both have Libra in that sixth house. So that's in common, the two of you. And Libra rules, it's an air sign that rules the mind. All the air signs rule the mind, thinking. But it also rules people, relationships. And Libra is the scale, so there's a desire to be balanced in relationships. So his heart and soul would be hard for him to get in touch with, and yet something yearning in him. In fact, it's his karma, because he's got his south node also in Libra, to find some kind of karmic balance for humanity. It's like he's looking for, he's working on something that has to be bigger than himself, in that it's got a greater goal to it. And Libra is about others. Directly opposite his moon is his Jupiter. Now that is true, and we know that would be true regardless of the exact time. So his Jupiter was in opposition to his moon at his birth. So in a way that's very interesting, because also then it would be intercepted in Aries and North Node in Aries. But Aries is self, Libra is other. So his one opposition is all about self and other. And his self is buried in an interception and in the 12th house, which is the unconscious. So this is a man who probably, who he was, I think he was celibate his whole life, if I recollect. I mean, he had trouble with intimacy, or he didn't have trouble with intimacy. He just had a different way of having intimacy that had nothing to do with the ordinary ways that most people do it. It was very unusual, very unusual. But self and other, he was given the gift of having this whole hidden side of himself that incorporated self and other in a way that allowed him to go very deep within himself, to such an extent within himself that he popped out into others without their knowing. I would say without their knowing it. He probably had a strong effect on other people. So he's a very sensitive man because he's got his Sun and Venus conjunct in Cancer. And that water sign, of course, is one of the most sensitive, empathic. So empathy means that he could feel the feelings of others, which is a good and a bad thing. That may be all the intimacy he could handle, because he was always extremely sensitive. Venus is about our relationships. On some level, he had a feminine side to him. You know, very, very sensitive, emotional. It's at the root of his chart. So, and his Sun is in the... You both have natural houses, most of them, because of you both have interceptions. You both have Libra intercepted, which is significant since you have so much in Libra. So you're both grasping to get at something that you know you have, and you know there's something about your relationships with others that's extremely important for you. It's very powerful and awakening, and yet hard to reach because it's intercepted. For him, it's his heart and soul. It's what he's doing in this life, and yet it's hard for him to access in his life and in his spirit. I'm sure, I don't know what he's doing in spirit now. You may, since you're in direct contact with him, but from the chart of his life, I see that he was a man who he must have had to follow his intuition so closely, and follow his intuition to the point of genius. His Mercury is in Gemini. Mercury rules Gemini, and Mercury is the planet of our mind, our thinking, and our communication. And so having Mercury, Gemini is probably the most curious of all the 12 zodiac signs. And having that kind of curiosity, it's at the end, 28 degrees of Gemini. I don't see it connected to anything directly, not squared, sextile, trined, or opposed. But so it's sort of floating there. So his mind would be extremely active, extremely curious. I would think with a mind like that, it would be hard to sleep.
Yeah, he was known to only sleep a few hours a night.
Wow, that's amazing. What it must have been like to have that experience. Very few people can understand someone like that, because it's like his brain is tapped into the universe in a way. He's really exploring the edge of possibilities. Neptune in Pisces. So Neptune was in its own sign. Neptune is in its own sign right now, as far as I remember. And it's in the house of Pisces. That's curious. It's trine to his Sun and Venus. How I would read that is that I would think that his relationships with others and a part of himself would be tapped into. His unconscious would be very, very active. So his unconscious was, and it's a trine, so it's a very positive pouring into him. But it's so positive, and Neptune being so otherworldly, Neptune is watery, it dissolves, it has no boundaries. He probably had no boundaries. He would probably, I don't know how that works. He has this complete relationship within himself. He's empathic. He feels people. It almost might be too much. He feels people so deeply, and it affects in a positive way. you know what I want to say is that it feels like he had the ability to pull inspiration out of the unconscious of other people and use it in benefit to himself and others. I think it was part of what drove him to make himself like, it's almost like an antenna into the spiritual unconscious of the collective. Yeah, it's interesting because, yeah, I just read these things intuitively, but just knowing what power Neptune has, being in Pisces, its own sign, very empowered, being in its own house, like triple empowered, and then trining into Sun and Venus in the water sign of Cancer at the root of the chart is like anchor. You know, that Neptune would be the antenna anchored into the root of the tree of life, which the chart represents, the tree of his life, would be this sort of antenna always funneling information in empathically from the collective unconscious, and then he does something with it. You know, in this third house where his Venus is right on the cusp. I don't know how he felt about home, but it would have been very important for him to have a home, to feel a strong home base.
He grew up very close to his mother, but once he left home, once he went out into the work world, he lived in hotels his whole life. So he bounced around from hotel to hotel.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That sounds expensive too.
Yeah.
It's not exactly frugal. He's got Pluto in Taurus right on his ascendant in his first house, and Uranus in Taurus. So that is just a revolution of self. I mean, with Pluto on your ascendant, you would be a Pluto type person to the max. So that means that Pluto deeply affects whatever it touches. It gets to the very core, to the very bottom of that possibility. Let's see, is Pluto in relationship? Pluto is sextile to Saturn. So Pluto and Saturn are working together beautifully. And that means that there's a lot of power in this man. That he was a very powerful man. And he probably didn't need to worry about money then, because there's some degree of stability in Taurus, but because it's Pluto and Uranus, they're both revolutions. They're both like implosion and explosion. So it's kind of like a security within chaos. You know, because Taurus wants to be secure, but Pluto and Uranus are absolutely chaotic because of the change making that they create. And they're in good relationship, so the change is meant to be a revolution. I mean, he created a revolution. There's still a revolution. He's got cars named after him. Their stock is like way up because it's still revolutionary what he's created and how it's being used and how his name is being used. It's an unusual chart. It's a chart that I think that this man with a Libra moon with Mars there, even though he was so empathic, I think he was probably able to keep a balance in his emotions, because it's an air sign, it's the scales. Mars is there, which is the warrior, which is the, masculine. And so he probably was not given to, even though he had all that water, he would probably not be giving into his emotions too much. He wants to stay in his head. His head is his happy place. I don't think he could probably have had much of a relationship with that, actually, because also it's in the house of Virgo, so he would always be busy, always be busy. There's really not much room for any frivolity, because he's always busy in the midst of constant change. It's like he's always living on the edge. Yeah, so that's it.